system launch is next week, I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. A system we no longer need you for, she replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. The acquisition is complete. I've been given full control of implementation with a 50 million budget. Your contribution is no longer required. My hands hovered over my keyboard, suddenly foreign objects I couldn't control. Just 30 minutes earlier, the company-wide email had announced our acquisition. Phoebe had been promoted to Chief Integration Officer with a budget that made everyone's eyes widen. Now I understood why she'd been smiling so smugly during the announcement. You have 20 minutes, she added, glancing at her watch. Security will escort you out. As I robotically placed my personal items into a cardboard box, my mind raced through the implications. My rent was due next week. My savings would cover 3 months, maybe 4 if I ate nothing but ramen. The job market was tight, and the 3 years I'd spent building this company's crown jewel, the integration system that had made us an acquisition target, couldn't even be properly listed on my resume because Phoebe had ensured my name appeared. Nowhere in the official documentation. I walked out with my head high, though my legs felt like they might buckle with each step. The security guard, Tom, who'd always greeted me warmly each morning, avoided my eyes as he took my badge. This isn't right, he muttered under his breath. Outside, rain poured down in sheets, soaking through my thin blouse as I waited for a taxi. My coat was still hanging on the back of my chair. I wouldn't go back for it. The taxi driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Bad day? He asked. I met his eyes, suddenly aware of mascara tracks down my cheeks. The worst, I replied. Or maybe not. Maybe this is just the beginning. I didn't know then how prophetic those words would be. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, hit the like button. If you've ever fantasized about getting even, subscribe now. Because what happens next in this story might just be the most satisfying thing you'll hear all day. My name is Ivy Carter. And until 2 hours ago, I was the lead architect for a tech integration system that transformed customer data into actionable insights. Not the sexiest description, but that system had just made our CEO rich and earned my boss a 50 million budget. I'm 32, single, and until today, I thought I was successful. I'd sacrificed everything for my career, relationships, sleep, even the painting classes I once loved. My apartment had become just a place to crash between coding marathons. My fridge contained nothing but coffee creamer and week-old takeout. Growing up with a single mom who worked 3 jobs taught me one thing. Security comes from making yourself indispensable. So I'd made myself exactly that. Or so I thought. I stumbled into my apartment and dropped the sad box of desk plants and coffee mugs on the floor. A framed photo slid out, the company holiday party from last year. There I was, standing in the background while Phoebe posed center stage with the executive team. Phoebe Blake. My boss for 3 years. A woman who'd once told me we were going places together. I'd believed her. We'd started on the same day. Me as a developer. Her as project manager. I created the systems. She presented them to clients. I stayed late debugging. She networked at happy hours. When she was promoted to director, she brought me with her as her technical lead. We're a team, she'd said. Your brain, my face. I believed her because I wanted to. Because I was more comfortable with code than people. Because presenting to rooms full of executives made my palms sweat and my words tangle. Because Phoebe seemed to genuinely value my work, even if she never quite understood how it functioned, until she did. 3 months ago, I noticed her asking different questions, taking more detailed notes, requesting access to repositories she'd never cared about before. I thought she was finally taking an interest in the technical side. I was flattered. I pulled my laptop from my bag and opened it on my kitchen counter. My personal laptop, thank goodness. Not my work computer. As it booted up, I poured myself a glass of wine I couldn't afford to waste, but desperately needed. The integration system had been my idea from the start. When our company struggled to differentiate itself, I proposed a solution that would seamlessly connect disparate data sources in real time. something our competitors couldn't do. The executives were skeptical until Phoebe championed it. Ivy can build this, she had told them confidently. I'll make sure of it. For 18 months, I barely slept. I built, tested, rebuilt, and refined. When early tests showed promising results, Phoebe began showcasing the system to potential investors. The demos were carefully scripted. I would set everything up, then step aside as Phoebe wowed them with the interface I'd designed. It's just business, she explained. They respond better to my presentation style. She wasn't wrong. Phoebe had a way of making people feel both impressed and at ease. Her background in sales had taught her exactly how to read a room. Meanwhile, I preferred the comfort of my code. As the system gained attention, so did Phoebe. Industry magazines featured her as an innovator to watch. At conferences, she was invited to speak about her revolutionary approach. I told myself it didn't matter. We were a team and teams shared credit. What a fool I'd been. I opened my email and stared at the message that had arrived minutes before my termination. Exciting news, acquisition complete. The CEO thanked everyone for their hard work, especially highlighting Phoebe's visionary leadership in developing the integration system that had caught the buyer's attention. My name appeared nowhere. My phone buzzed. A text from Leo, one of the junior developers. What happened? Are you okay? I stared at it, unsure how to respond. Leo had joined 6 months ago. I'd trained him personally, showing him the architecture I'd created, the elegant solutions to complex problems. I'm fine, I typed back. Just business. Another message appeared below it. Phoebe called an emergency meeting. Says there are concerns about the system documentation. Says only she understands how to fix it. My fingers froze over the screen. Documentation. I'd documented everything meticulously. It was my nature. Every function, every variable, every potential edge case. But the documentation lived in a secure repository that only I had full access to. Or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, IT had performed a routine security update that required everyone to reset their passwords. Had Phoebe somehow gained access during that window? I quickly logged into the repository. Everything looked normal, except there was a download history I didn't recognize. Someone had exported the entire documentation library last Friday evening, the night of the company party. The party I'd skipped to complete the final module. A cold sensation washed over me. She'd planned this, waited until the system was complete, the documentation finished, and the acquisition guaranteed. Then she'd taken everything and cut me loose. I was replaceable. Worthless. I closed my laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes. Think, Ivy. Think. That's when I remembered the contract. Not my employment contract. That had been standard boilerplate that gave the company ownership of anything I created. But there had been another document, one I'd insisted on before joining. I pulled open my filing cabinet and dug through folders until I found it. A simple 2-page addendum signed by the previous CEO, by legal, and by me. At the time, it had seemed like standard protection for a cautious newcomer. The company had been small then, eager to hire someone with my skills, willing to accommodate what seemed like a minor request. As I reread it now, my heartbeat quickened. Section 6, Paragraph 4. Any proprietary integration systems developed by the employee shall remain the intellectual property of said employee until formal transfer, which must include 1. A 2-month transition period, and 2. Appropriate compensation for ownership rights, as determined by independent valuation. My hands began to shake, but not from fear. For the first time since hearing Phoebe's cruel dismissal, I felt something else, hope. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Diego Reyes. We'd met at a coding boot camp before I joined the company. He'd gone on to law school instead of tech, specializing in intellectual property. I hesitated, my finger hovering over his name. Was I overreacting? Was this document even valid after all this time? My screen lit up with another message from Leo. Phoebe's freaking out. Something about missing authentication protocols. The demo for the new parent company is bombing. I pressed Diego's number. Hello? A groggy voice answered. Diego? It's Ivy Carter. I need your help with a contract. Right now. There was a pause, then the sound of sheets rustling. Ivy? It's almost midnight. I know. I'm sorry. But this can't wait until morning. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I added, suddenly aware of how desperate I sounded. Hold on. I heard rustling, then the click of a lamp. What kind of contract are we talking about? An IP ownership addendum I signed when I joined my company. I was just fired without notice after building the system that got us acquired. Send it over, Diego said, his voice sharper now, fully awake. And Ivy? Don't contact your former employer until we talk. I took photos of each page and sent them. Then paced my apartment while waiting for Diego to call back. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. This is fascinating, he said without preamble. Did they give you any severance, transition period, ownership compensation? Nothing. Just 20 minutes to clear out my desk. Diego made a sound between a whistle and a laugh. Then they're in breach of this addendum. It's surprisingly well crafted for something you did yourself. I didn't trust them even then, I admitted. The CEO kept changing terms during negotiations. Smart woman. Especially this clause about the authentication protocols requiring your personal key for any major update or data migration. They literally can't fully implement your system without you. I froze. What did you just say? Section 8? Core authentication protocols require originator verification through secure channels established at system creation. That's you, Ivy. You built in a kill switch. I hadn't thought about that protocol in months. When I designed the system architecture, I'd included several layers of security. The deepest one required my personal verification for major structural changes, a precaution against someone accidentally corrupting the database during implementation. I'd almost removed it before launch, but left it in as an extra safeguard. So, what does this mean? I asked. It means they need you more than you need them. The question is, what do you want? What did I want? Revenge seemed too simple a word for the burning in my chest. I wanted recognition. I wanted justice. I wanted Phoebe to feel what I felt standing in that office while everyone watched my humiliation. I need to think, I said finally. Don't wait too long. Based on what you've told me, they're going to realize their mistake very soon. After hanging up, I opened my laptop again and checked my personal email. 3 new messages from Phoebe in the span of an hour. 8:47 p.m. Need access to authentication protocols ASAP. 9:16 p.m. Call me immediately. Critical system issue. And 9:58 p.m. This is unprofessional, Ivy. The board is asking questions. My finger hovered over the delete button when a new email appeared. Not from Phoebe, but from our CEO, Anthony. Ivy, understand there's been a miscommunication. Please call me directly to discuss your position with the company. Urgent. I closed my laptop without responding. For 3 years, I'd answered every urgent message, canceled weekend plans for critical issues, and sacrificed sleep for company emergencies. Tonight, they could wait. I took a hot shower, letting the water wash away the day's humiliation. As steam filled the bathroom, clarity began to cut through my foggy thoughts. I had leverage. I had time. Most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. My phone buzzed again as I toweled off. A text from Leo. Where are you? Phoebe told everyone you sabotaged the system before leaving. Board members are here past midnight. So that was her play. Blame me for her inability to understand the system she claimed to have built. Classic Phoebe, always finding someone else to take the fall. I texted back, interesting theory. What's actually happening? Migration failed. Authentication errors. Parent company reps looking nervous. I smiled for the first time since being fired. Not sabotage, just careful engineering. They're talking about flying you in tomorrow. Phoebe looks like she's about to explode. I didn't respond. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and stood by my window, looking out at the city lights. My phone continued buzzing with messages I didn't read. For once, I wasn't rushing to solve someone else's problem. Morning came with surprising clarity. I'd slept better than I had in months, despite everything. When I finally checked my phone, I had 17 missed calls and 32 messages. I called Diego first. "They've been contacting me," he said immediately. "Their legal department tracked me down somehow." What did you tell them? That I represent you now, and all communication needs to go through me." He paused. "Ivy, they're desperate. The new parent company is threatening to nullify the acquisition if the system isn't fully operational in 48 hours. 48 hours? I repeated. "That's our leverage window. We need to meet. How soon can you get to my office?" An hour later, I sat across from Diego in a small but neat office downtown. He'd laid out my contract on the desk between us, key sections highlighted. "They're claiming the addendum isn't valid because it wasn't included in subsequent promotion paperwork," he explained. "That's ridiculous. My role never fundamentally changed." Diego nodded. "They're grasping at straws. Now, let's talk strategy. What exactly do you want out of this?" I'd been pondering that question all morning. "Three things," I said finally. "Full credit for my work, fair compensation for the system I built, and—" I hesitated. "And?" Diego prompted. "And I want Phoebe exposed for what she did." Diego leaned back, studying me. "The first two are straightforward. The third is trickier. We can't make exposure a legal demand, but we can create circumstances where the truth comes out naturally," I suggested. A slow smile spread across Diego's face. "Now you're thinking like a lawyer. Let's draft our response." We spent the next 2 hours crafting a careful message. Not a list of demands, but an invitation to resolve the unfortunate situation in a way that benefited all parties. By the time we finished, the company had called 4 more times. "Ready?" Diego asked, finger hovering over the send button. I nodded, and with that simple motion, everything was set in motion. The response came within 15 minutes. A request for an immediate meeting with the board, including representatives from the parent company. They offered to send a car. "Too eager," Diego murmured. "They're panicking." "Good," I said. "Let's make them wait until tomorrow." "Playing hardball?" Diego raised an eyebrow. "I like it." We scheduled the meeting for 10 a.m. the next day, giving the company another night of uncertainty. Another night for Phoebe to dig herself deeper, trying to fix what she didn't understand. That evening, Leo called instead of texting. "They brought in external consultants," he said without greeting. 3 different teams. None of them can get past the authentication blocks. How's Phoebe handling it? I tried to keep my voice neutral. He lowered his voice. "She told the board she mentored you through building the entire system, that she designed the architecture and you just executed her vision." My grip tightened on the phone. Did they believe her? At first. But then the consultants started asking technical questions. It got awkward fast. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. Phoebe stumbling through explanations of systems she'd never bothered to understand, her confidence faltering with each question. "There's something else," Leo continued. "The parent company rep asked to see all the development documentation with your signatures. Phoebe claimed you never properly documented anything." A harsh laugh escaped me. "She said what?" "Yeah." That's when Anthony looked really concerned. He asked about the repository. Phoebe said, "You must have deleted it before leaving." The repository that contained every detail of my work for the past 3 years, every decision, every breakthrough, every late night. The repository she had downloaded before firing me. "Leo, I need you to do something for me," I said carefully. "Can you check the access logs for the documentation repository? I need to know who accessed it in the past 2 weeks." "Already did," he replied, surprising me. "That's actually why I'm calling. Phoebe downloaded everything last Friday. I have the logs." My heart raced. "Can you forward them to me?" "Already did that too. Check your personal email." He paused. "Ivy, what she did to you was wrong. Most of the team knows it." After we hung up, I forwarded the logs to Diego with a simple message. More ammunition. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old sketchbook and paints. setting up by the window where the city lights provided a perfect backdrop. For hours, I lost myself in colors and shapes, creating something new instead of fixing someone else's problems. By morning, I felt centered in a way I hadn't in years. I chose my outfit carefully, not the standard business attire I'd worn at the company, but a deep green dress that made me feel confident, professional but distinctly me. Diego met me in the lobby of my former office building. "Remember?" he said quietly as we waited for the elevator. "Let me do most of the talking. When you do speak, focus on the technical aspects only. No emotions." I nodded, though containing my emotions would be the hardest part. As the elevator climbed, I silently rehearsed what I would and wouldn't say. The conference room fell silent when we entered. 8 people sat around the table. Anthony, our CEO, 3 board members, 2 representatives from the parent company, a woman I didn't recognize who had legal written all over her crisp suit, and Phoebe. Phoebe's expression flickered between surprise, anger, and something else, fear, before settling into a composed smile. "Ivy, thank you for coming in. We have some concerns about the system implementation that Ms. Carter will be addressing the technical aspects shortly." Diego interrupted smoothly. "But first, we need to clarify the terms of her involvement." He placed copies of my contract addendum on the table, along with printouts of the repository access logs. As each person reached for the documents, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Phoebe. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw the exact instant she realized what was happening. The precise second she understood that her carefully constructed narrative was about to collapse. And I knew exactly what I wanted my revenge to be. The boardroom air felt charged with tension. Anthony cleared his throat, glancing between the contract in his hands and Phoebe's increasingly rigid posture. "Before we begin," Diego said, "I'd like to establish some facts. Ms. Carter designed and built the integration system that forms the centerpiece of your recent acquisition. According to this addendum, which was properly executed and never superseded, she retains intellectual property rights until specific conditions are met." The company lawyer leaned forward. "This addendum was signed 3 years ago under different management. We contend that, if the signatures remain valid," Diego interrupted, "the company accepted the benefits of this agreement for years. You can't now claim it doesn't apply simply because it's inconvenient." One of the parent company representatives, a woman with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, tapped the access logs. "Could someone explain what these show?" Before anyone could respond, Phoebe jumped in. "Those are standard backup protocols. As project lead, I regularly archived system documentation. I couldn't help myself. At 11:42 p.m. on a Friday, while I was completing the final module, the room fell silent. The silver-haired woman turned to Phoebe. "You told us yesterday that Ms. Carter failed to properly document the system." Phoebe's voice faltered. There were gaps in her documentation that I was attempting to fill. Anthony's expression darkened. "That directly contradicts what you said in our emergency meeting. You claimed Ivy deleted documentation before leaving." "Perhaps I misspoke under pressure," Phoebe said, her smile strained. "The important issue is getting the system operational." "Indeed," said the silver-haired woman, turning to me. "Ms. Carter, can you resolve the authentication issues?" All eyes turned to me. This was the moment, my opportunity to explain exactly how Phoebe had betrayed me, how she'd stolen credit, how she'd humiliated me. The words bubbled up in my throat. Diego touched my arm lightly, a silent reminder of our strategy. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I can resolve the issues. The authentication protocol requires my biometric verification for major structural changes, a security feature to prevent unauthorized system modifications. That seems..." The company lawyer hesitated. "Unusual. It's documented in Section 27 of the Architecture Overview," I replied calmly. "Which Phoebe approved last year." Phoebe's face flushed. "I don't recall that specific you." "Page 42, paragraph 3, I continued. "Your initials appear in the approval column." The silver-haired woman leaned back, a glimmer of what might have been appreciation in her eyes. How quickly can you implement the necessary fixes, Ms. Carter? Diego stepped in. That depends on the terms of Ms. Carter's re-engagement. As her counsel, I must insist on proper recognition of her intellectual property rights, fair compensation, and appropriate credit for her work. Credit? Phoebe interjected. Ivy was part of my team. Teams don't get individual credit. Interesting perspective, Diego replied, sliding another document across the table. These are press clippings where you discussed your revolutionary system. No mention of teams there. Anthony ran a hand through his hair. Let's focus on solutions. Miss Carter, what would it take to get you back on board immediately? Diego and I exchanged glances. This was proceeding exactly as we'd anticipated. 3 conditions, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. First, proper compensation for my intellectual property. The system currently being implemented. Diego has prepared a fair valuation. Anthony nodded. And second, public acknowledgement of my role as creator and architect of the integration system in all company communications, press releases, and technical documentation going forward. Phoebe made a small noise of protest, but Anthony silenced her with a look. That seems reasonable, given the circumstances. And third, I met Phoebe's eyes directly. I will oversee the implementation personally, as Chief Technology Officer. The room erupted in murmurs. Phoebe stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. That's absurd. I'm the Chief Integration Officer. The system falls under my purview. The system you can't operate, the silver-haired woman said quietly. The system you claim to understand. Anthony looked pained. Phoebe, please sit down. Let's discuss this rationally. Anthony, there's nothing to discuss. Phoebe snapped. She's holding the company hostage. You can't reward that behavior. Diego smiled thinly. Miss Carter isn't holding anyone hostage. She's enforcing her contractual rights after being wrongfully terminated without the transition period her agreement requires. The silver-haired woman turned to Anthony. Our timeline doesn't allow for prolonged negotiations. If Ms. Carter can implement the system as promised, her terms seem reasonable considering the alternative. Anthony nodded slowly. I tend to agree. Ivy, if we meet these conditions, how soon can you begin? Immediately, I replied. The authentication issues can be resolved within hours. Full implementation would take approximately 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Phoebe laughed incredulously. I promised the board 3 days. You promised something you couldn't deliver, I said simply. The second parent company representative, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Ms. Blake, yesterday you assured us you understood every aspect of this system. Now it appears you can't even access it without Ms. Carter's assistance. Can you explain this discrepancy? Phoebe's composure cracked visibly. I oversaw the entire project. The technical details were delegated. Yet you presented yourself as the architect, he pressed. I was speaking in a managerial capacity, she insisted, her voice rising. Ivy worked under my direction. That's not how innovation works, the silver-haired woman said. Direction isn't creation. Anthony cleared his throat. I believe we need to make a decision quickly. I propose we accept Miss Carter's terms, with details to be finalized by end of day. Diego produced a preliminary agreement he'd prepared. We anticipated this outcome. The key terms are outlined here. As papers were passed around, Phoebe tried one last gambit. This is setting a dangerous precedent. What's to stop other employees from holding critical systems hostage? Perhaps, said the silver-haired woman. The precedent we should worry about is taking credit for other people's innovations. The meeting concluded 30 minutes later with a signed agreement. As people filed out, Phoebe lingered, waiting until we were alone in the conference room. You won't succeed, she said, her voice low. You're not a leader, Ivy. You're a coder. You don't have what it takes to navigate the politics at this level. I gathered my papers calmly. You taught me more about politics than you realize. This isn't over, she warned. Actually, it is. I met her gaze steadily. You fired me, Phoebe, in front of everyone, called me worthless, Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. The next 2 weeks were among the most challenging of my career. I worked directly with the parent company implementation team, untangling the integration issues that had emerged. True to my word, I resolved the authentication problems within hours. But the full system implementation required meticulous attention. Phoebe attempted to insert herself into the process repeatedly, scheduling unnecessary review meetings and questioning my decisions in front of others. Each time, I responded with technical explanations so thorough that even attempting to follow them made her eyes glaze over. By the end of the first week, the parent company representatives had taken to coming directly to me with questions. By the middle of the second week, Phoebe's meetings were being rescheduled or canceled entirely. The board scheduled a company-wide announcement for Friday afternoon to formally introduce the new organizational structure. As I prepared for the meeting, Leo knocked on my temporary office door. "You did it," he said, grinning. "Everyone's talking about how you saved the acquisition. The system works," I replied modestly. "It just needed the right implementation approach." "It's more than that," Leo insisted. "Phoebe's been telling everyone for months that she designed the architecture. Now, everyone knows the truth." I paused in gathering my notes. "How's she handling that?" Leo's grin widened. "Not well. She tried to take credit for the successful implementation in yesterday's executive meeting. Anthony shut her down immediately. Said something about accurate attribution being essential to company integrity. I couldn't help but smile. Integrity. Imagine that. The company atrium was packed when I arrived for the announcement. Anthony stood at the podium, with board members and parent company executives seated behind him. Phoebe sat at the end of the row, her face a careful mask. "As you know," Anthony began, "the past 2 weeks have seen significant changes in our organization. The integration of our technologies with our new parent company represents an exciting opportunity for growth." And he continued with standard corporate optimism until reaching the personnel announcements. "I'm pleased to introduce our new executive team, who will lead us through this transition and beyond." One by one, executives were called forward, their new titles announced to polite applause. When Phoebe's name was called, I held my breath. Phoebe Blake will be transitioning to our client relations team, where her communication skills will strengthen our customer partnerships. Not fired, but demoted and sidelined. From the tight smile on Phoebe's face as she stood for a moment of awkward applause, this was unexpected news to her as well. And finally, Anthony continued, "I'm pleased to announce our new Chief Technology Officer, the architect of the integration system that brought us to this momentous juncture, Ivy Carter." The applause that greeted me as I walked to the podium was thunderous. From the development team, I heard actual cheering. As I scanned the crowd, I saw genuine smiles, nods of respect, and more than a few thumbs up from people who had witnessed my humiliation 2 weeks earlier. At the podium, I kept my remarks brief and forward-looking, focusing on the potential of our technology rather than the past. But as I concluded, I couldn't resist one final statement. Success in technology isn't about who speaks the loudest or who can best present an idea, I said, my eyes briefly meeting Phoebe's. It's about innovation, integrity, and the quiet persistence to build something that works exactly as promised. I look forward to leading a team where every contributor is valued for their actual contribution. The pointed message wasn't lost on the crowd. As applause erupted again, I saw Phoebe slip quietly out a side door. Later that evening, as I was packing up my new office, the corner space that had once been Phoebe's, Diego called with news. "The final compensation agreement came through," he said. 6 times your previous salary, plus stock options, and the implementation bonus we negotiated. And the public acknowledgement? The press release went out an hour ago. You're prominently featured as the architect and creator of the system. There's already interest from tech journals for interviews. I sat back in my chair now, and looked out at the city lights. "Thank you, Diego, for everything. You did the hard part," he replied. "You built something so valuable they couldn't ignore you." After hanging up, I pulled out my old company badge, the one Tom the security guard had awkwardly taken 2 weeks earlier. I'd found it in my new desk drawer with a sticky note. Thought you might want this back. T. The photo showed a younger version of me. Hair pulled back severely, expression serious. I hardly recognized that woman now. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your office looks good on you. Never doubted you'd find your way back. Tom. I smiled and began typing a response when an email notification appeared. From Phoebe, my finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. I opened it. Ivy, I underestimated you. A mistake I won't repeat. This company isn't big enough for both of us, and I won't be relegated to selling what you build. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. P. I read it twice, then calmly clicked delete. Her threats meant nothing now. The system she'd claimed as her own had exposed her. And her inability to understand what she'd taken credit for had been her undoing. No dramatic confrontation needed, no elaborate scheme, just the elegant justice of truth revealing itself. That was my revenge, not destroying Phoebe, but simply creating space for the truth to emerge. She had destroyed herself by believing she could claim credit for work she didn't understand. I turned off my computer and picked up my bag, ready to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new systems to build, new problems to solve. But tonight, I would sleep soundly, secure in the knowledge that I had reclaimed not just my work, but my worth. As I walked through the quiet office, I passed the empty desk that had been mine 2 weeks ago. The desk where Phoebe had stood over me and declared me worthless. I paused, running my fingers lightly across its surface. Thank you, I whispered to no one in particular, for showing me that the true measure of my value was never in someone else's hands. If you've ever had someone try to diminish your worth or take credit for your hard work, leave a comment below. And if this story of quiet persistence and truth prevailing resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about bringing someone else down. It's about rising to exactly where you belong.